Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to the chess.com Speed Chess Championship in 2020. We have reached now the semi-final stage. Today we're starting with the semi-final between Hikaru Nakamura and Wesley So. So Wesley So won the semi-finals against Hikaru Nakamura in the Skilling Open with a tight result. This match game will be also a tight one. Of course, at the end of the video, I'm going to reveal the result of the semi-finals. In the other semi-finals, Maxim Vasilograf is playing against Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. So this will be, I think, a very, very cool continuation of the tournament. We'll see who is now moving up to the finals. Let's check out now one game in which Wesley So played with the white pieces and Hikaru played with the black pieces. Wesley So opened with the move e4. We have by Hikaru e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and after bishop to b5, the Spanish game, the Ruy Lopez. So the Ruy Lopez is of course one of the most complex openings that you can play. Many sidelines are possible, and now I think in the top grandmaster level, most of the times the move knight to f6 is played, the so-called Berlin defense, and we have now d3. This move is now very, very often played. Maybe the main line would be maybe something like castling, then you risk some knight to e4, some dynamic games, rook to e1, and similar ideas. Here, after the move d3, it gives basically black the opportunity to develop the bishop on a very active square, bishop to c5 here. So what black wants to do, of course, is very nice to get a very nice control of the d4 square, because white wants to build, of course, c3 d4 pawn breakthrough motifs. And here Wesley So castles. So in the main line, Wesley So often played the move bishop takes c6 after d takes c6. You see, you cannot take the pawn. I've mentioned it many times, but I'll mention it again. Knight to e5 leads, of course, into losing game here for white, because we can simply play queen to d4 and threaten checkmate, and also take out the knight on e5. So that's why here I think the castling idea is not so good immediately by Wesley So, although it's still main line. But I've seen also one game Magnus Carlsen lost with the white pieces against Levon Aronan after castling. So as I said, bishop takes c6 is now, I think, the most aggressive way here to play d takes c6. Then we're building basically from white's perspective, because we have given up our light square bishop. We're building maybe a sort of a light square fortress with knight to d2, h3, b3, knight to c4, a4, because we want to compete, of course, on the light squares. One of the main ideas in this particular position is simply to battle against the light square bishop of blacks. But in a game after move castling, it gives basically now Hikaru Nakamura the opportunity to simplify the position, and Hikaru does it immediately. Knight to d4, never ever allow white to take here on c6 and double up the pawn structure, really messing up black's pawn structure on the queen side. Knight to d4, bishop to d4. Here you could also try here e takes d4, but never do that, because you're first of all blocking out your bishop's activity. You have a double pawn structure, and it gives now basically white a comfortable game, because white will simply battle here with this 4 versus 3 situation on the king side. Will have a pawn majority attack, and still I think you need to castle here on the king side, and white will crush you here, I think, on that side of the board. So that's why bishop to d4. Okay, the bishop can be kicked away, white can get a tempo, but now bishop to b6. Still, this bishop on b6 has a perfect activity and is aiming against the weak f2 square. So the knight to a3. Here Wesley So is trying to develop his knight without blocking out his own dark square bishop. This dark square bishop still needs some kind of an activity, and here Hikaru plays c6. We have bishop to a4, and now d6, building a very flexible pawn structure. Here it's really a symmetrical position. When we watch the center, it's really a symmetrical pawn structure. It doesn't give immediately white or black some chances to create pawn breakthrough motifs, to create some kind of an advantage. It's still a flexible game, and in the game bishop to b3. So Wesley also develops his bishop and also aims against the weak f7 square. So here a5. What Hikaru, of course, noticed that here maybe in some occasions black could be vulnerable by some b4 moves by white. White could also maneuver the knight to c2 on a more centralizing square. Then maybe even try b4, a4, a5. B5 ideas. So a5 is a very nice positional idea by Hikaru, and I really love when I see Hikaru Nakamura play more positionally. Sometimes it feels so that he's sometimes rushing into attacks. Here a5, perfect prophylactic move, never allowing white to make progress on the queen side. Maybe white can still create a pawn breakthrough motif with d4, but so far the queen side is protected, and still we having a good activity on the king side. We have to notice that because both of these bishops are aiming against the king. Here the knight can be improved with knight to g4, the queen can sneak in, so white is a little bit lacking of defenders here in front of the king. No minor piece activity in front of white's king, no minor piece protection of white's king. So far a good development by Hikaru Nakamura. We have knight to c4 attacking the bishop, bishop to c7. Okay, the bishop is pushed away. Still this knight can be also pushed to, could be pushed away by b5, and still we can also play d4 and getting maybe another tempo against the knight. So that's why here a4 played by Wesley, he blocks also the queen side, and we have bishop to e6 because Hikaru wants to compete now with this very active bishop on b3. If the knights move somewhere, we can also take it out and have maybe an equal game. From black's perspective, is of course it's a very good idea to have an equal game. So bishop to g5, and we now come to the critical moment of the game. Bishop to g5, it allows now Wesley so to kick away the bishop. h6, we have bishop to h4, and now comes g5, very aggressive. So we have seen now the positional Hikaru. Let's see now the attacking Hikaru. g5, kicking away the bishop, bishop to g3, and now h5, because Wesley so I think was a little bit slow in the center. He didn't compete immediately like in the usual Royal Opens or maybe in the Italian game. If you're familiar with the Italian game, when we are trying the c3 d4 pawn breakthrough motif, so far it's not possible because the pawn on e4 is hanging. But I think this opening prep wasn't so good by Wesley. So here h5, threatening to trap the bishop in the game. f3 was played by Hikaru. Even if you try h3, then you get, I think, first h4. You see you have to retreat with the bishop, and now g4 breaks the position immediately on the king side. It's very risky. You can maybe try something like knight to e3 to maybe simplify the position, but now you see we have g takes h3, and after bishop to e6, here f takes e6, and now after g takes h3, I think black has a comfortable game. The g file is opened. We can play something like queen to e7. Even queenside castling, I think, is here for possibility, and in some occasions we could try knight to h5 and then cement the knight on a very active square on f4. When we play maybe bishop takes f4, e takes f4, then the pawns are undoubled again, then the pawns are rolling again, and I think it could be a very risky choice here for white. So that's why f3, but still Hikaru plays on the same idea. The same thing will happen, h4, kicking with the bishop to e1, and now g4 anyway. Very aggressive play by Hikaru. We have bishop to d2. Here f takes g4 doesn't bring you so much because bishop to g4 will happen. Here queen to d2, it's not a problem. Here h3, again we're simply splitting, opening the position in front of the king. Maybe knight to e3 can be played, but still we can again compete after maybe bishop takes e6, f takes e6. But I think still white hasn't improved the position. You cannot really take over here on the square f5 in this particular line. This wasn't played in the game, but still this is a very important pawn which restricts maybe the knight's ability here to jump on a very active square. If this pawn wouldn't be here, if this pawn would be maybe somewhere on the f file, then knight on f5 would be a great positional move for white, but of course it's not possible. So here bishop to d2 was played, and Hikaru now attacks in the center. Very nice move, again creating new dynamics in the position. Although his king is in the center, but as I said, it seems to me that Wesley so didn't compete in the center immediately like in the usual lines. The d5 again creates a new tempo against the white's king. We have e takes d5, we have c takes d5, and now knight to e3. We have g3, and here we have of course h3, and we have now, let's flip the board a little bit. We have now really sort of a, it's not the same, but it's similar to the King's Indian, if you're King's Indian player, and there are sometimes in some occasions maybe some ideas queen to d7 and then bishop takes h3 followed with queen to h3 and then queen takes h2, because we have really pushed our pawns very aggressively against white's king, and now there are maybe some tactical threats here around the square h3 like in the common King's Indian, although it's not the same. But as I said, if you ever see this kind of a pawn structure, always consider a nice tactical shot here against the pawn on h3. So let's go further. Here you see, pardon me, I really messed this one up. Let's go to the position. Okay, here after knight to e3, we have g3 and h3. You see, if you try h takes g3, then you're opening simply here too much the h file. There are even some tactical possibilities when you can even, I think, sacrifice the knight with knight to e4, then to play queen to h4 and deliver checkmates. So the main idea is now, like as I said in the King's Indian, to liberate our long diagonal for the queen, to sneak in with our queen to h4. So taking out the pawn is not an option here. So that wasn't played in the game. h3, we have knight to h5, very important move to occupy this weak square in white's position. It's the weak square f4. In the game, Wesley tried the knight to g4, and now f5 again. You have to retreat with the knight. And Wesley tried here a risky idea because he didn't find really better moves. Knight to e5. What he noticed, of course, after bishop to e5, that we have two pieces in front of the king. We can occupy the e file. We can attack one of these pieces and maybe build a battery and grab a piece back. But here he, after move rook to e1, Hikaru plays his first mistake, I think, in the game. Queen to d6, very risky move. A better idea is to get out with your queen with a tempo, queen to b6. If you try d4, then we can retreat simply with the bishop, maybe here to c7. And the problem is now this bishop is protected. Even if you try maybe something like bishop to d5, still we can cover everything, I think, with knight to g7. And we can hide with our king maybe here to f7, getting our rook here to the e file, and everything is perfectly protected. We're continuing the game with up piece. So here after the move rook to e1, Hikaru makes a mistake, and now we have queen to e2. Getting an attack against both of these bishops. We have bishop to c5, here queen takes e6, queen takes e6, and now Wesley so has equalized the game, but that was only because of this huge blunder by Hikaru Nakamura. King to d7. Now it's still a equal game. After bishop takes f4, we have knight to f4, and now rook to e5 attacking this weak pawn. And in the game, rook to c8 has to, rook to f8 has to be played in order to protect, of course, this weak f5 pawn. And now we want to have at least some kind of a competition on the e file, because white has occupied this only open file on the board. We have d4, and now after rook to e8, now comes a blunder by Wesley. So he plays the move rook to d1, which is really incredible. Why, I'm not sure why he did that, because you have to double up the rooks, I think, here with the move rook to e1. Although maybe you are vulnerable to some forks, but at least you see now, after trades of rooks, we can take out this pawn, and after knight to b2, we can also take out this pawn. And this is now, I think, a much better endgame here for white. White has two connected pawns, although maybe here Hikaru can take the pawn on a4, but still we can compete. Here bishop takes c6, and we'll simply grab out the knight. So that's why it's not possible. Really a huge blunder by Wesley. So he played here rook to d1, and it allows now Hikaru Nakamura to really split the pawn chain here. The pawn chain on b2, c3, d4, after d takes e5, king to e6, very important move to create a blockade, never allow this pawn to get advanced. And now after the move king to f1, we can simply take here rook to e1, and again Hikaru Nakamura hides. Now his knight is very powerful. What we only want to do is compete here on the e file, or if we get attacked, we can also protect our pawn with rook to d8. In the game, bishop to c2, we have d4. Here Hikaru Nakamura plays, I think, a great move. He doesn't want to have this bad pawn on the d file. He simply sacrifices, but now he can again attack. In the game, rook to e5, and Hikaru simply takes. Rook takes d4. We have rook to e8, and now rook to d2. In this position, Wesley so resigned. So what to do? Let's see. If you try to retreat, then you get rook to f2, first a check, king to e1, then we can take out this pawn. It comes again with the check. We can take out this pawn, and I think these two connected pawns on the f and g file are simply too much to handle. You lose simply too much time if you want to chase these two pawns. I think black is simply faster here and can make progress. And in this position, after the move rook to d2, as I said, Wesley so resigns. So This is it. Hikaru Nakamura won the match game against Wesley. So congratulations to Hikaru. When we watched the match game, I think it was fully deserved. He played really an outstanding second stage of the match game. He played so great. He played so aggressively against Wesley. So is now in the finals and waits the winner, of course, of this other match game between Maxim Vasilograf and Magnus Carlsen. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. A really interesting line by Hikaru Nakamura. Let's go back. Let's analyze this line again a little bit. So as I said, after the move d3, bishop to c5, here castling. So one of the main lines I think is to take simply bishop takes c6, not to castle immediately. It gives now black the opportunity to cement the knight without messing up the pawn structure. And I think from this point on, Hikaru Nakamura really equalized the game. It's a risky idea, of course. It can be played in this top grandmaster level, but I don't recommend maybe for some beginners to play this line from White's perspective. The main line is here bishop takes c6 and d takes c6, and then maybe to build, as I said, this fortress on light square. So congratulations again to Hikaru Nakamura. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my Skilling Open cover. It's not the Skilling Open, pardon me, it's the chess.com Speed Chess Championship coverage. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all time series, check out my best chess games that I've covered so far. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.